Join me in today's video as I begin the journey to finding the best 2024 YA fantasy book. And so far this year, I've already read 3 2024 YA fantasy books, and amazingly, they were all 5-star reads. And those 3 books were A Fragile Enchantment, which I read in January, and then A Tempest of Tea and Where the Dark Stands Still, which I read recently. So I loved all 3 of these. If I had to rank them, I would say A Fragile Enchantment at 3rd. And then these 2 are tied because I can't really decide which one I like more, because they're both very different. They have very different vibes, but I loved both of them, and I can't really compare them because they had very different vibes to them. Moving on, this is going to be the first video of hopefully many more to come this year, because I love YA fantasy and I just want to read as much of it as possible, and it just makes me so happy. And there's just something about YA fantasy that resonates with me. And so the 2 books I'm going to be reading in this video are So Let Them Burn and Somewhere in the Deep. So I'm kind of going to do a book battle and have these 2 go head to head and see which one I like more, and then also see where they fall with the other 3 that I just mentioned. And so these 2 are both January releases, and I actually started So Let Them Burn last night, so I can actually talk about this one a little bit and give my first thoughts, because I am 106 pages in on chapter 11. So first we gotta talk about this cover, which is gorgeous. I just love all the colors in it. And also, if you look at the back, there's a dragon. So this book follows 2 sisters, 17-year-old Farron and 18-year-old Elara. And they are very much opposites. Farron is very much the rebellious, speak your thoughts type of girl, whereas Elara is more reserved and a rule follower. But despite them being opposites, they have a very close bond and they would do anything for each other. And so 5 years before the story starts, their country was in a war with the Langley Empire. And Farron actually ends up being blessed by the gods, and she is gifted with the magic to channel the gods and use their powers. And she is one of a kind, she's the only person that can do this in their world. Her people are able to use a little bit of magic, and their magic involves summoning their ancestors and channeling the power of their ancestors into their bodies. But Farron is the only one who is able to channel the power of the gods. And so she goes off to fight the war, and her sister goes with her because she doesn't want her to go alone. And at this point, Farron is only 12 years old and Elara is only 13, so they're barely teenagers and they're going off to war. So they end up winning the war, and now our story is taking place 5 years later, and Farron kind of just wants to live as normal a life as possible, whereas Elara, even though she loves Farron very much, she's kind of felt overshadowed by her sister because her sister has these powerful and unique gifts, but she only has regular summoning magic. And so Elara wants to become a Drake pilot, and Drakes are these giant metal flying war machines that are shaped with magic to look like dragons. And so they are slightly alive and they are picky about their pilots, and it actually takes 3 pilots to pilot a Drake. So when there is a new Drake built, there is then a search for new pilots. And at the beginning of the book, there is a new Drake, and Elara goes to try out to be a pilot for it, but unfortunately she is not chosen. And while she is doing that, Farron is off at a peace conference that is being held between her country and the Langley Empire, because the queen of Farron's people wants to establish a peace with the Langley Empire so they don't have to go to war again. Then Elara does end up at the peace conference as well, but when she is there, she ends up hearing this voice and she doesn't know where it's coming from, and she ends up following it outside, and there's a dragon outside because the Langley Empire have dragons and they have dragon riders. And she learns that this dragon is choosing her to be a dragon rider. And of course she is like, no, this can't be happening because they are the enemy. But nevertheless, it happens. And the thing about the dragons in the Langley Empire, each dragon has 2 dragon riders because there's a pilot and a co-pilot. And this dragon already has one of its riders, so Elara will be the second. But when she touches the dragon, bad things happen. And the dragon and the other dragon rider and Elara kind of lose their minds. And then at this point, it causes a big commotion, and Farron ends up showing up, and she sees her sister and the dragon and the dragon rider, and she soon realizes that her sister is connected to the dragon. So like if she kills the dragon, she'll kill her sister. So she doesn't want to do that, but she also doesn't know how to subdue the dragon without killing the dragon. But then she hears like this voice in her head, and she uses these powers that she doesn't know where they came from, but it does help knock out the dragon and her sister, so no one is killed. And then we learn after, when Alara and the dragon and the other rider wake up, that what happened is this affliction that has been affecting the dragons lately, and by extension their riders, where all of a sudden like they just go out of control for no reason at all. And they've been calling this condition the Fury, and right now there is no way to cure it. And actually the leader of the Langley Empire tells Farron that what she did was the first time the dragon and the dragon riders have been subdued without actually hurting them. And he's like, oh, you might be the only one who can actually help us, so we want your help. And she kind of has to help them in order to save her sister. And so that's where I'm at the story so far. And all that happens like within the first 100 pages. And so I'm enjoying it so far. It's definitely giving me Fourth Wing vibes because you have the dragons that are used for war, and it's also been like just intense so far. So the atmosphere feels similar to Fourth Wing. And so far, I am enjoying both Elara and Farron's point of views. And I really like how you get both of their perspectives because they kind of balance each other out well since they're very much opposites. And I am finding the whole magic system to be very interesting so far, with Farron's people being able to summon their ancestors and channel them into their bodies in order to form supernatural feats of strength. And I also am interested in the whole dragon aspect as well. And I want to learn more about like the bonds between the dragons and the dragon riders. And also there's already a possible love interest introduced for Farron's sister, which also intrigues me. So that's all my thoughts on this book for now. I will be back when I have read more and have more thoughts. Hi, so it's the next day, and I'm back with reading update because I am more than halfway through. I am now on chapter 23, page 228, and so far I am enjoying this book. I feel like there hasn't been anything that has amazed me so far or made me love it. I'm just thoroughly enjoying it at the moment, but also there hasn't been anything that I don't not like about it either, or anything that I hate about it, so I'm just enjoying it so far. I'll say though, at the moment I am enjoying Alara's chapters a little bit more than Farron's chapters. I'm just finding Alara's chapters more interesting because Alara has gone off to Dragon Rider school, and that is definitely giving me Fourth Wing vibes. And so her chapters have been very exciting and fun. And something else I think the book is doing really well right now is putting its own spin on Dragon Riders. Because in this book, something that is already unique from other Dragon Rider books is each dragon has 2 riders instead of 1. And also there is something known as the den concept. And this concept is that dragons that are born at the same time consider each other siblings. And so these dragons and their riders can all share their thoughts. And I think that's pretty cool because usually a lot of times you just see it's just the dragon and the dragon rider sharing their thoughts. And then in contrast, I feel like Farron's chapters have had less going on, and they're also like more melancholic, so they're not as fun to read. But I do still find them interesting, and I have to say that I still really love Farron as a character, and I'm like loving her more as time goes on. Just like her whole personality, how she is gutsy and will speak her mind, but she's also is very self-aware. So she hasn't come across as annoying or too strong of a personality, at least so far. That could change, who knows? And there also has been hints at a possible love interest for Farron as well. And so far, I can kind of see the chemistry between the two, but I'm not fully feeling it yet. Like, I'm not fully convinced by that relationship yet, but hopefully as the book goes on, I'll feel something more for that couple. I know earlier that I mentioned that there were hits for Alara's love interest as well, and that love interest is still definitely there, but I feel like very much it's going to be very much a slow burn because they started off as almost enemies and then became reluctant allies, and now they're like kind of friends. So we'll see how that goes, but I think that romance has very good potential to be amazing and to make me feel things. So those are currently all my thoughts about So Let Them Burn. I am going to continue reading, and my next update will be my final thoughts when I finish this book. This worries me. Part 4, Sacrifice. What's gonna be sacrificed? Who's gonna be sacrificed? I'm worried. Hi, so I'm back and I have finished reading So Let Them Burn. And I ended up giving it 4 stars. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. I love the last 100 pages of this book. They were amazing. And those last 100-ish pages gave me like the same feeling that I had when I was reading Fourth Wing. It was just like a pure adrenaline rush. And just so many things happened at the end. And there are things that made me happy and smile. And then I also almost cried twice. And then, of course, the way it ends on a cliffhanger because this is the first book in a series. And I will definitely be reading the next one to find out what happens. And I loved our 2 main characters, Farron and Alara. They really felt well-developed and well-rounded, and they felt like real people. And I also just really loved their sisterly bond that they shared. They would do anything for each other, and I just loved that. I will say that one of the reasons why I didn't quite love this book was, as I touched upon earlier, Farron's chapters just weren't as interesting to me as Alara's chapters were. I found myself looking forward to reading Alara's chapters more than Farron's because there was just more going on in Alara's chapters and more things that were exciting to me. Whereas in Farron's chapters, especially her chapters in like the beginning and the middle of the book, they were focused a lot on her realizing that she has feelings for this certain boy. And while there were some cute moments between her and that other character, I just never really felt fully invested in their romance, and their romance just never clicked with me. And unfortunately, like, that feeling remained with me for the entirety of the book. Even like by the end, I still wasn't fully sold or invested in their romance. And on the other hand, Alara has a relationship with a certain character, and I just loved their relationship. It has my heart, and I felt fully invested in it. I will say, though, that in those last 100-ish pages of the book, Farron's chapters do come a lot more interested, and that was when I finally felt completely pulled into her story chapters. One of the other things that I liked about the book was I did really like the world. I liked the variety of the different magic systems. So you had the dragons, but then you also had astro magic, and then you also have technology mixed with magic. And so having like all these different magic systems and seeing how they all interact and affect one another was really interesting. And additionally, I think the writing flowed really well and was just really readable. The writing wasn't flowery or over descriptive. It just did what it had to do and used the amount of detail that it needed to get across what it was trying to say. And that just worked really well for this book. And I just found myself flying through the pages because it was so readable. And similarly, the plot also flowed very well. But I will say that the plot was a little predictable, especially in Farron's chapters. Like, I could see exactly what path her chapters were taking, and I was like, oh no, like, don't let me be right, because I don't really want to go down that path. But there were some details in the story that did surprise me, so that was a plus. And even though I felt that Farron's chapters were less exciting than Alara's chapters, I never felt bored reading them though, because I was super invested in Farron as a character. Like, I loved her as a character, so I wanted to know where her story was going. And so my love for her as a character alone kept me reading and flipping the pages. And so overall, I really enjoyed this book, and I will definitely be picking up the second one. And so I would recommend this book to anyone who loves Fourth Wing and dragons, to people who love reading about strong sibling relationships, and also to people that just love thrilling YA fantasy with high stakes. So next, I'll be picking up Somewhere in the Deep. So once I read a little bit of this, I will tell you what it's about and give you my first thoughts. And we shall see if I enjoy it more than So Let Them Burn, or about the same, or less. The battle is on. Hi, so I'm back, and I have started Somewhere in the Deep. So I am on chapter 9, page 61. So not very far yet, but I'm farther enough into it that I can now tell you a little bit about what this book is about. So our story follows 17-year-old Crescent Dune, known as Cress, and she is an orphan, and when her parents passed away, they left her with a lot of debt to repay. And she lives on an island, and pretty much there are only two ways to really make a living on the island. And one of those ways is to be a miner, and that's the safer option of the two. But unfortunately, Cress cannot do that because her debts her parents left behind prevent her from doing so. But also, her parents apparently did something really bad, and now because of that, a lot of people look at her with suspicion and hatred. So she has no choice but to do option 2. And option 2 is to fight dangerous creatures in an underground fighting pit. So that's what she does. And she has been doing this since she was 12 years old. And she has become one of the best fighters in this underground arena. In her 5 years of fighting, she has never lost a single battle, and she has 78 kills to her name. But at the beginning of the book, something happens and she ends up becoming banned from the arena. And so now she's in a panic because she doesn't have any way to repay her debts because she can't work in the mine and there's really no other option. And her dream is she wants to pay off her debts and leave the island. Like, she just doesn't want to be on this island anymore because of the memory of her parents and what they did haunting her. And then just when all hope seems lost and she doesn't know what she's going to do, she's offered a deal. And the deal is if she joins a hunting party for a dangerous rescue mission deep within the mining caves, then her debts will be erased and she'll be free to finally leave the island. And while this mission is a very dangerous one, she accepts because she doesn't really have any other option. And that is where I am in the story so far. So far I am enjoying the story, but I haven't been completely pulled in yet, but we are still very much at the beginning and the story is just beginning. So I have a feeling that once we actually enter the mining caves, things will get a lot more exciting and interesting. I will say though that the first line of this book is definitely intriguing and definitely grabs my attention. So I'm just gonna read that first line now. So the first line of the book is, "Today I heave, blood streaming down my face and dripping onto the packed ground below is not the day I die." So that right there, that first line just completely grabbed me and made me like think, what is going on? Like, I need to know, so I need to read more. And I will say that the first chapter of the book was very strong. It was super exciting and action-packed and set the tone for the book. And so far, I am liking Cress as a character. I feel like I don't know enough about her yet, though, to make a fully formed opinion, but so far, what we've had of her, I do like. And then there's one other character so far that has stuck out to me, and that is Cress's childhood friend, Ravon. And Cress met Ravon after her parents had passed away, and they've been friends ever since, and they look out for each other and care for each other, and their bond is just so sweet and heartwarming. And now Cress spends like a lot of time with him and with his two brothers, because Ravon has an older brother and a younger brother. And together they all kind of form like a found family, which I love the found family trope. Also, it seems that Ravon has feelings for Cress, but she seems like she's kind of oblivious to those feelings and don't really know how she feels about him, if she feels about him in that way. But at the same time, she's kind of been more focused on just trying to make a living and not die and not ending up in the salt mines working to her death because she can't pay her debts. So it's kind of understandable that she hasn't really been focused on romance. And even though like we've just been introduced to them and their like dynamic, I just already love it so much. Like I definitely have a soft spot for that kind of relationship, like the friends to lovers. But I don't think he's gonna end up going to the mines with her, so I don't know if that's actually gonna go anywhere. And on the inside flap of this one, it does say that she ends up being in the mines of her childhood enemy, so could there be an enemies to lovers in here? Maybe. But I would really like to see a relationship between her and Ravon. But I also don't think this book is going to have like a big focus on the romance. It's going to be more focused on the thrilling adventure of going through these caves and just trying to survive. But I guess the only way I'm going to find out is if I read more. So I'll be doing that. So yeah, those are really all my thoughts for now. I don't have too many yet because I'm not that far into the book. But once I read more, I'll be back with more thoughts. Hi, so I am back with reading update. I have finished Somewhere in the Deep, and it has been a couple weeks since I finished this, but life just got in the way of me filming my final thoughts, but here we are now. So this book, I have mixed feelings about it because overall I enjoyed this, but I didn't end up enjoying it as much as I thought I would have. But that's possibly my fault because I feel like this book ended up not being for me. So I really love YA fantasy, but I love a certain type of YA fantasy the most. And my favorite type of YA fantasy is whimsical and has fairy tale-like vibes. It has magic and has romance mixed into that and preferably a happy ending. And this was very much not whimsical and very much not fairy tale vibes. And the overall tone of it was very harsh. And that being said, So Let Them Burn was also not very whimsical or fairy tale-like, but this one did have magic in it and it had dragons, and this one doesn't really have magic in it. It's more just like physical fighting skills, which I thought I was really gonna enjoy the monster battles in this book, but I ended up just not enjoying them as much as I thought I would. And I think that and like the lack of magic and the lack of the whimsical atmosphere just made this book not completely for me. However, one thing I did really like about this book, and it was actually my favorite part of the book, was the romance in this. So I know I mentioned in my earlier update that there looked like there could have been a romance between our main character and her childhood friend, but I wasn't sure if it's gonna happen because I didn't think that he was gonna go on the adventure with them into the mining caves, but he ends up going, and that made me so happy that he goes with them. And so you got that romance and that relationship in the book. And that was just one of my favorite things about the book because they were just so cute and sweet together, and I loved seeing their relationship progress. And my other thing about the book that I did really like was I did end up feeling really attached to the characters, to the main characters, and to some of the minor characters that are part of their rescue mission team. However, that being said, there were some deaths earlier on in the story that I didn't really feel moved by, but I think that was because at that point I didn't feel fully connected to those minor characters who died, whereas I feel like if those deaths had happened later on in the book, I would have felt more attached. And something else that didn't completely vibe with me was just the plot and the pacing of this book. So when we were going through the mining caves, I thought that adventure through the caves was going to be really exciting, but I actually found myself bored at some times, and also I just wasn't completely feeling the monster fights. And there were plot twists in this book. There were 3 major ones, and I think 2 of them were really well done and I liked them, but the third one it didn't really vibe with me, and I feel like that plot twist came too close to the end of the book and it felt like it was trying to accomplish too much, like it was too wide in scope, and I was kind of like, how is this all gonna happen before the end of the book? Like, the stakes just seemed too high with that plot twist. At the end, I was kind of proven right because I feel like those stakes were kind of just like brushed aside. It didn't really have the consequences that they should have. And one other thing that I felt like pulled me out of the story sometimes was the writing style. Most of the time the writing style was fine, but there was just some times that I found that sentences were awkwardly worded and I had to reread the line a couple times, and that ended up taking me out of the story a little bit. For the most part, I liked the way it ended. This book is a standalone, but I learned after reading this book that there is actually a book that the author wrote before this one that takes place in the same world that this book does. So that was kind of cool because that character is referenced a couple times in this book. So overall, I enjoyed this. It's probably not something I would read again, but I don't regret reading it. And so I am giving it a 3.5. Because for me, a 3 stars book that is good, but probably one that I'm not going to reread again. Star book is also a book where I kind of have an equal balance of things I like and also didn't really like. And I feel that's how this one went. So when comparing these two, I'd say I definitely enjoyed So Let Them Burn more than I enjoyed Somewhere in the Deep. But I would say if either of these sound interesting to you, definitely check them out because you never know, one of these could be your new favorite book. And so that pretty much ends this video. Let me know down below if you read either of these and what you thought of them. Or let me know down below what has been your favorite YA fantasy book or just favorite book in general that you've read so far this year. And if you made it to this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye!